Welcome to The Treatment Plan, a podcast about how healthcare really works, from weight loss and patient care to the systems and incentives behind it all. Hosted by Jack Usher and David Usher, MD. So we basically left the story off where you had processed all of the problems and you basically made the decision that you're going to leave, and then you left. So we're basically starting on day zero of Perform Medicine.
So all the planning's over and writing the business plan.
No, you could go into that. I guess we didn't really talk about that. That you're right. That's all kind of pre-day zero.
The decision to leave is made, but now we're talking
let's say
about...
day zero is the first day of planning. The day zero is the day the decision has been made, or the day after the.
Oh gosh, yeah. Let's see. So what happened? I decided I'm gonna leave establishment medicine because of all the things we've previously talked about. And so what? Yeah, I think maybe I spoke about this, but I just kind of read about a model of just direct pay care in a medical economics journal. On his front page, this family practice doctor who was doing this and charging very little and just kept his overhead really low, and hired a medical assistant who just ran the whole show for him. And so that's what I decided I would do. Then it was just a matter of writing out a business plan. And I went down to the local university extension office and talked with the guys there who, help small business people to put together business plans and so forth. And this is before ChatGPT, so I had to write my own and, conjure up the resources to kind of think that through. But also do the math and kind of come up with, can this make money? What would it take? How many patients a day would we need to see? And, all of that kind of thinking that through, because at the end of the day, if I can't feed you kids and the wife and keep the rent, the mortgage payment made and so on, doesn't matter how unhappy I am, I'm stuck with where I am. So I put together a business plan, and part of that involved talking to a banker about getting a little loan and see if we can come up with some money to buy the stuff we need to do to get started, which is, your basic clinic stuff, which we continue to need from time to time now, exam tables and supplies and things like that. So
let's dig into some of that, because you said a bunch of interesting stuff. So one is, you read it in a medical economics journal. That was your original inspiration for the idea. Was that guy... Did you ever talk to that guy?
I did.
During that time or afterward?
Yeah, and during that time, he was getting a lot of kind of national publicity around his model for this. And so one of the things that there was an organization I had looked into a little bit, and I was actually a member of for a short period of time, that was really concierge physicians, the American Academy of Private Physicians, I think,
which we've talked a little bit about before, the concierge model, yeah.
Yeah, and it's... So I think it was at one of their meetings, perhaps, that this Brian Forrest was his name, is his name. And he offered a little seminar basically during one of the AAPP meetings, if I remember correctly. So it may have been some other group, but in any case, so I actually flew out to North Carolina, bought the seminar, which is basically just an hour, 90 minutes sitting in a room with other people, like-minded people, having a discussion, being able to pick Brian's brain and ask him questions and listen to what people were thinking about things. And
those can be super valuable.
So it was incredibly valuable. Yeah. It really helped me solidify what I thought I knew, which it's nice because it just gives you some confidence, like, oh, here's a guy who's doing it. And so, and how you can make it work. So, and some of it's just real basic business stuff that physicians aren't trained in, right? Negotiating a price. And so that is, and then I saw him a few times at different conferences over the years. He kind of went big in one sense. He got into doing something, and suddenly he had a model with like 45 clinics and 12 states.
Oh, okay, because that was going to be one of my...
private equity related, I think.
Because that was going to be one of my other questions, was you said he had this small little shop with one MA doing all. So were you imagining that you were going to do the small hang your own shingle and just kind of be a one-man band, or did you have a vision of doing something more like that at the time?
Well, at the time, what I had envisioned getting something started with the idea that if it was the kind of, I don't want to say paradise or utopia, but if it was a much more pleasant, valuable way to practice medicine, there would be other providers eventually who would want to do this, right? Mostly I was interested in, can I make this work for myself? And, if it's just me and it's making me a reasonable income, I can do this for the next 20 years because I think it would be fun to do. Um, and that, so it wasn't the idea of, gee, I'm going to just keep adding people. But on the other hand, I thought, we could just keep adding people because if providers, particularly family physicians and people who do family medicine, can get out from under the jackboot of Medicare regulations and all the garbage that goes with that. I would think there'd be a lot of people, even coming out of residencies, who would think, I'm not going to work for the big system. I'm going to go work in, a direct pay practice, or that's what we call it at the time, was direct pay. And we still refer to it as that, for the people who are paying us on a fee for service basis, but one of the things that got coined very early on, probably a couple of years into my practice, was the low cost membership model that covered everything, that became the term got coined direct primary care, or DPC. And what separated that from concierge was you'd pay a membership fee, but it wasn't expensive like concierge can be, and you didn't bill insurance. So all of your money was basically coming from memberships, kind of like having an app, right? And if you have an app, people can use it for whatever they want. They pay their $2 a month or however much they spend for their members, their ability to use the app. But once that amount is paid, you can use it all you want, or like your cell phone bill.
The guy, was this mentioned in the article, this model? Or what elements of it were mentioned or not? Like, was he not taking he wasn't taking insurance from the beginning, right? So that was always part of your idea as well.
That was always part of, yes. Yeah, this was chuck all the cost associated with billing insurance, which in those days, we were estimating probably, and may still be true, like 40% of the cost of running a primary care practice had to do with the cost associated with getting paid for what you do, right? Yeah, and I believe that, yeah, because, and one of the things that I have to give family medicine, the American Academy of Family Physicians, or the Board of Family Medicine, credit for, is during residency, they have a practice management course, basically, or a month, where you learn about what's it take to run a practice. But that whole model back then, and this is 1995. That sounds like a long time ago. 1995 was built around the idea of, this is how a family practice runs, and here, so if you're going to do this, then you need to have, they estimated you would have to hire 4.5 staff people to be able to run a family practice. And why is that? Well, because you have to see enough patients to pay your billers. in order in order to see enough patients to pay your billers, you would have to have a triage nurse to handle all the phone calls from the huge volume of patients you'd have, that you would need to be able to see on a fee-for-service basis in order to be able to pay your billers. So you'd have to continue to jack up your cost basis in order to pay your billers. And what it really came down to, and Brian Forrest proved this, and I am evidence, our practice is evidence of this, is what you really need is about a part-time medical assistant. You could really run it with a part-time medical assistant, but it's hard to hire somebody part-time. So if you hire one full-time, then, to start with, they're kind of sitting around a little bit, but you didn't need 4.5 people, you really needed one. And it didn't need to be an RN.
Right. So you had this. It makes sense why it was in a medical economics journal, because that seems like that's kind of the crux of the whole thing. Is it's kind of an economics discussion.
It's the
Yeah.
economics
Yeah, it
of it,
makes sense.
exactly.
So you read this guy's article. You basically wanted to do what he was doing at the time. You met him. You went to a seminar. You uh, and then you mentioned you went to go see about a business plan. What did the business plan look like?
Mhm. Well, it's kind of now you could do Chat GPT, and it would crank you out with but you could get the basic elements of a business plan. What does that mean? What are you going to do? How do you know it's going to work? How are you going to sell it? It forces you to think through all of these things that, if you don't have a business background or have never started a business before, you have to be pretty cognizant of. And there were still things we missed. Um, uh, but it got us about 90% of the way there, and the bankers, of course, who you want to borrow money from, they ask you to see your business plan, and they want to know, kind of how you came up with your numbers, and it's a good vetting process for you. It makes you kind of be honest, because if you're going to ask somebody else to put some skin in the game, they're going to want to know what their risk is really. And so it's a good. I imagine if you were to turn around and sell your business these days, it would be the same thing. You'd have to be really clear about the value of various things, and your bookkeeping would have to be solid and so on. So somebody could get a fair idea of what price they'd be paying and why. Um, so one of the things that we did very early on when we started talking about this was I talked to our financial guy,
That's your personal financial
um,
advisor.
personal financial advisor. Yeah, thanks, um, Ron, and he had done well for us in the past and continues to this day to do well for us. But one of the very first things we did was talk to Ron and say, Ron, am I crazy or what? And he directed me to a book called The E-Myth by
Oh,
Michael
classic.
Gerber. Yeah, and said, yeah, read this, E-Myth Revisited. Before you do anything, read this. You have to get really clear on what it is you're asking for if you're going to start your own business. And so, and that just comes down to if you're going to start a business, you're going to be the technician. That is the guy. You're going to be the production line. You're going to be the manager, and you're going to be the salesperson, the entrepreneur. If you start it by yourself, that is basically what you're responsible for all of that. There's nobody else to do those things, so you have to be willing to do them. And the other thing out of the E-Myth that was really important was you can build a business. Basically, you can build a practice, which is just you seeing patients. You can build a business, which is you seeing patients, and maybe you have some other people seeing patients, and maybe you have lab and X-ray and a couple other things. Or you can build an enterprise. But at the end of the day, if you're going to build your own business and you want it to be worth something someday, you have to build it in a manner that no longer is your single service, the widget you're making, the seeing the patient is no longer the product. The enterprise itself, the business itself has to be thought of as the product. And you have to build it with that in mind and with that kind of systematic approach to understand that at the end of the day, if you want to sell this to somebody, you have to have a saleable.
You have to have enterprise
entity.
value.
Right. Enterprise value. That's what the non-business guy would call. You would call that. You're the business guy. Economics, marketing, all that. Yeah. Enterprise value. Yeah.
If you haven't, listeners, if you have not read E-Myth Revisited and you're at all interested in anything business, it is like canon up there. It's just one of those books that it's like everybody who's anyone should read the book if you're at all interested in the business space.
Right. Even if you don't understand business and have no interest in business, for you to read that book and understand the risk that small business owners take, and when at some point you understand that 90% of small businesses fail. Rarely do any do $1 million or much less $10 million or $100 million. I mean, the odds of doing that with a small business is really incredibly low. So, and I don't think people appreciate how much blood, sweat, and tears and money goes into trying to start a small business. And if you don't have any business background at all, I think it'd be great for every American voter. You have to read this book before you get to cast a vote.
Yeah. It's a good point. It's
understand.
It's like when somebody. It changed my. That book, and then of course growing up and everything else, but it totally changed my view of somebody going out on their own and starting like their own restaurant. And even if a restaurant falls apart in 8 or 9 months, it just takes some serious guts to do that. You can't do something like that without literally putting all your effort into it, and even if you do that, it still might just completely crumble, and you might fail and lose a bunch of money. But you look at things a completely different way when you have all of that experience, right, or knowledge in mind.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I was in a position where worst case scenario with a medical degree, board certification, 20 years of experience or however many years, 15. It wasn't such a high risk thing that, gosh, I was going to lose it all. I would just turn around and get a job somewhere and, see patients again and get a salary and it'd all be okay. But yeah, the people who are trying to do something innovative and pick your space, this new kind of taco, we're going to sell these, whatever this taco is, we're going to sell those. You have to, that's really a stretch. And
that's another good point. for somebody who might be listening or reading this after the fact is in your case, when you talk about starting a business, it is a risk, of course. Starting every business is a risk, but being a medical doctor or being in family medicine, being a primary care physician is not, it is a different risk profile than a 22-year-old trying to build an app or something. It's a totally different, I mean, the principle of the thing is the same, but everything else. And so that's, yeah, that's something to definitely keep in mind is it wasn't as risky as probably some people are probably imagining, like starting, starting your own business.
Right. And what's at risk is different. I mean, if you think about where we were having practiced medicine already for, let's say, 15, including residency, maybe 18 years, by the time we left to start reform medicine, uh, by that, and we had lived kind of pretty frugally all the time and all that. So we had put away a lot of money. We don't live high on the hog. People think about doctors make a lot of money. We certainly didn't live like that. We didn't make a lot of money anyway, but as physicians go, um, but plenty good, plenty well. But we just stashed away a lot of cash. So the risk to us was not draw a salary for a year or two and just kind of live off of savings. And at the end of the day, if it didn't work out, well, you know, we threw some of our savings down the hole.
But you saved basically for an opportunity like that, or to have flexibility in your future, thank your future self, or yeah, your future self will thank you, sort of thing. Where it's like, well, I socked away this money and then I have this opportunity and I'm going to take it because I've positioned myself.
Right. I think Dave Ramsey says, "Live today, live like no other, so you can live like no other." Yeah, don't drown yourself in debt and obligations that just basically enslave you to your current job. You know, so so if you can stomach living like a college student for a few years, you can really sock away a lot of cash because you're not spending it on stupid rent and highfalutin lifestyle that you really
Yeah.
can't afford.
I mean, even that's even true. This is kind of a tangent, but even as you work your way up the income spectrum, that's you don't necessarily have to look at college to have like an absolute level of spending, no matter what money you make. But if you're always saving half of what you make, that, for example, that would be you could make whatever $500,000 a year, and you can live a very nice life on $250,000.
So that's a good point. In those days, we were obviously was married, and we had three kids, right, school age kids, and we were thinking about putting them in college, and college was important to us. We wanted to pay for you guys' school if we could, and so I mean, there was a lot on the line. You guys were all in Catholic schools. We were paying tuition on that. Um, I mean, it wasn't without risk. It just was going to look different, and it would look different for a physician who's had a chance to sock away some money to compared to the 23-year-old kid who hasn't, right? So, um, but we learned a lot. Yeah. Let's see. So, yeah. So Michael Gerber, it was build it. So, yeah. The idea behind the e-myth that I really found valuable was just be prepared to go in, recognizing that you at some point won't be able to be the technician and the manager and the entrepreneur. You're going to have to pick and choose what it is you're called to do. And you'll have to find somebody else to do the other stuff and do it as well as you do. Right. And then if you're thinking, long term with this, you want to build the thing in such a way that what develops is something that you have a product to sell at the end of all of this, which is actually the enterprise of the business itself. So if you otherwise, I've seen all these things where people are trying to sell this bar they've owned for 30 years, and and they just can't believe nobody wants to buy it from them, and they haven't done anything to improve it or, innovate. They've just had a loyal following of patrons who show up and, drink Pabst Blue Ribbon. And meanwhile, the bar has just aged and gotten older, and all the clientele have gotten older, and the place just looks kind of run down. And then, why doesn't somebody love this like I do? The bar owner just can't figure out. So you just have to be thinking about that all the time. To always, how is this going to look to somebody who might want to purchase this someday? So all that goes into kind of your thinking about how you plan and set up your operating system, everything you do. I mean, it's all, you got to kind of think long term and big picture strategy around that, strategic. So
So you read the book. You obviously took away things that you still remember from it, and you said to yourself, "Okay, I get this. I'm in. I'm doing this." And Ron, so you took the book from Ron. You talked to Ron about this, and then what happened next?
hmm Oh, we got some accounting advice.
Oh, that's another thing I wanted to point out. Speaking of the risk profile, you also have a cadre of people that you years of living in the same place. Obviously, mom had business background, legal background. You had a personal financial advisor, had a relationship with an accountant. Leaned on these people in the moments where you needed some advice.
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly. Like, we're thinking about doing this, and they all nod their head and go, "Oh." And you can just see the wheels spinning like, "Hmm. Well, we should sit down and talk about what that looks like, with the tax accountant, for example, and all the implications of that. And what are you going to do for an income? Who's buying the groceries? And yes, of course, your mom, uh, my lovely bride, is an attorney. So, with a business undergrad degree. So we had that little wisdom sitting at home as well. So we had medicine, business, and law. Yeah, right.
The way you were describing that, by the way, makes it sound like it's like a small business pre-Cana. Like, this is my okay, should we let's talk about all of that. Have you thought about all of this? Yeah.
No, that's exactly true. Um, you have to understand the implications of a lot of that kind of stuff, particularly, don't get me started on the federal tax code, but with regard to the federal tax code, you kind of have to understand what you're getting into, and what the implications are.
So you made the rounds and talked to all these people and you kind of hashed out the legal and financial, personal finance and all that sort of stuff. And then what happened after that? Where did you go? Did you think about where you were gonna open a clinic? We could get into, like, the non-compete, situation that you had. Or did you have a name? What do you remember what order you went in when you thinking about all of that?
Well, I think a part of it, I mean, you can't leave out the deeper kind of spiritual part of what we were talking about, which is, just seemed like the right thing to do. Like there's some justice in doing this. Everything, the value of it and being able to sell it and all that stuff is there. But the reason that's there is because the whole system as it's built just seems so unjust in so many ways, right? Like, people who are paying all the Medicare and Social Security payments on their payroll taxes can't afford to see a physician in real time right now. I mean, that seems crazy. So, anyway, so it was, a lot of people say we prayed about it. Well, I don't remember exactly praying about it, but I do remember being very circumspect about it in that regard. Is this the right thing to
Well,
do?
there's an author and an entrepreneur. He's been on a lot of podcasts and stuff. His name is Daniel Priestley. I don't know if you've heard of him before, but he's not the first one to have said something like this, but he's who I remember saying this. He's written a number of books, but his thesis about entrepreneurship is he thinks it's this amazing thing and that more people should be entrepreneurs and blah blah blah. But being an entrepreneur is really really difficult. It's not for everybody. The ones who should and the ones who make the best entrepreneurs are the ones who feel like they can't do anything else but this thing. They feel called to it, literally. And it sounds like that's kind of the that you had. It was just
That's kind
yeah.
of where we
So yeah,
were. You're not talking me out of this. Actually, the day I had been following this Obamacare legislation development for a year and a half, right? And literally, the day after watching Congress anguish over this, and we had this conversation, but you know, and then President Obama signs this 2,700-page debacle into law. I came home from work and there was this medical economics magazine sitting on the countertop with this smiling face of Brian Forrest looking right at me. If you're listening to this, Brian, thanks again. 20 years later, however long it is, 15 years later. Um, and I picked that up and, direct pay medical practice. And, it was a 6-page article. It was written in double space and large font for us family practice kindergartners. And there are a couple tables in there showing you this is what you charge for your labs, and here's what you can charge for your office visits. And, you only need one person to do this. And God, it's so simple. It is almost stupid not to do this. And your mother told me you read that article and I could see a change in your demeanor, like you were
yeah.
out of there. Like, this he's leaving practice. Um,
When the student is ready, the
so
teacher
yeah, I think
appears.
that's right. That's what it was. And yeah, it was like I was being groomed. It felt weird. A year and a half of watching Obamacare, like somebody's taking a crap on the medical system and watching it go plop. And then somebody comes along and goes, let's just flush this down and start over. Like, okay. That's kind of kind of the way I felt about it at the time. So actually, one of the first things I did was use the opportunity, because I knew I was going to have to do a lot of organization and thinking and researching and so forth. As I bought myself an Apple computer.
Oh, yeah, I remember that you had for, like, 10 plus years. Maybe you still have it, I don't know.
It's in my office next door. Yeah, barely works, but it still does. Anyway, um, uh, and so yeah, it was a really deep gut kind of thing. Like, this is the thing I got to do.
When, not if. We were doing this
Right,
thing.
right. And it took me a year and a half of. We started planning a year and a half before we actually opened. So I continued to work away, seeing my patients and uh, doing leadership things and committee work and all the stuff that I was doing before. And just after hours was kind of thinking and planning and going to meetings and things like that to kind of sort out how this might look to open my own practice.
So you'd mentioned it briefly, or I mentioned it briefly before, but you had the non-compete agreement, which has gotten a lot of press in the last less than that. There's been a lot of discussions about non-competes with the FTC or whoever is regulating that. But what was say a little bit about that, because there's probably doctors out there who have those, and how you worked through that and how you thought about it.
The contract that I signed when we joined basically auto renewed every year. So we had a kind of a salary guarantee, and then for the first 2 years, then after that, and if you outperform the salary guarantee, they pay you the difference, which was nice. And so, um, but after the first 2 years, then you just were basically on what we would call on production. So, your what you produced in one year would become your salary for next year, the basis for the salary for next year. Um, and that worked really well. And you had PTO, and but if you take too much of your PT, if you take all your PTO, you got to keep in mind that those are days you're not working, and therefore your salary next year might be cutting into that. So there's always a little.
For not only for doctors, but for the legal field, for the consulting field, where you have this production hours patient seen. You get PTO, but it doesn't come out of the denominator, the total possible hours you could be seeing people. So you're still cutting into that time, even though it's PTO.
Right. So it's a decision to manage your work life balance, right? And how much do I need to feel like I'm staying in control of my my faculties? How much time do I need off? And there was, in fact, to their credit, where I was working at the time, they capped how much you could make per specialty, because they didn't want people incentivized to be working crazy 80-hour weeks and all that. They kind of said, here's the range, and you can make more within that range or less within that range, and so on, depending on how busy you are. And that was the way it was for the first 11 years of my practice. But toward the end, it became kind of a little bit more corporatized, and there was always, there were always kind of people within the department who everybody kind of said, well, he doesn't see as many people as everybody, or she doesn't, or she's kind of slow. And so at the end of 10 or 11 years, it actually came to be that the corporation, the organization kind of said, if you're not meeting this certain criteria for production, we're going to start dropping your salary, because you can think of all the reasons why that would be. You're not generating the same number of referrals. Everybody else working harder than you, and that creates some sense of resentment, injustice. That not only do these people see more patients, but that means they generate more paperwork for themselves and deal with more phone calls. And if you don't want to kind of be minimally busy, then maybe this isn't the place for you, and we'll be happy to escort you outside of your non-compete area, where you can, not work for somebody else, as Elon Musk said. So one of the great phrases of all time. You can, if you don't want to work, come to the office and work. You can stay at home and pretend to work for somebody else and not work for somebody else.
Yeah, that's good.
Uh,
He says to the
yeah.
remote
So
worker.
right.
Uh,
Yeah, that was kind of funny. So yeah, so I mean, it was reasonable. The point is, it was an auto renewing contract, and I hadn't looked at my contract, in 10 years, because I was perfectly happy, or I thought I was. Um, and things would just auto renew. I would make a little bit more maybe than I did last year, because if inflation just kind of drives your income up a little bit. You could see the same number of patients and make a little bit more money. But if you're not thinking about it, you don't realize the rest of your cost of living is going up the same amount. So you're really working for no more money. But that was what we did for a long time. But so written into that contract, which I hadn't thought about for a long time, was, oh, what does that non-compete clause look like? So I dug that out very early on and took a look at it, and it was 2 years and a circumference of 25 miles. So if I was to leave the practice, excuse me, if I was to leave the practice, I would have to go 25 miles from my main clinic location for 2 years. And not practice medicine basically within that circumference, or that radius, I guess be the word. And so that went into my thought processes when I started thinking, oh, well, gee, where would we plan this? And so I did what others have done and went 25.1 miles to the west, and towards a bigger population center. And by the way, I was not only doing family medicine, I was also doing obesity medicine, and a lot of it, helping people lose weight. Yeah. And so I moved not in the direction where I thought there were more people with fewer resources who'd be happy to pay lower prices for medicine, even though that turned out to be true unwittingly. But I also moved towards the larger population center, towards Minneapolis, St. Paul, with millions of people. I thought, if we're going to have a cash pay practice, what better way to test that out than to move closer to where all the people are, and maybe get a little more exposure that way. So we moved over to Menominee, Wisconsin, a town of about 14,000 people, and it's a university town, so it's not like they have no resources there. But the surrounding Dunn County, it turns out, is one of the lowest median household income counties in the state of Wisconsin, despite having the university town there.
Yeah, and to be clear, we didn't. The family didn't move. You just moved your practice, or you started your practice.
Yeah,
over
so
there.
the kids all stayed in
Yeah.
their school, actually working for the same employer that I was planning to leave. And but I planned to open 25 miles away, and that would just be my thing. That would be part of my deal, is I'm going to commute for a couple of years, and it was all interstate the whole way. In fact, I picked the practice location because it was right off the interstate. Easy to get to, not only for myself, but easy for patients to find. Easy to talk about. It's right across the street from the Walmart.
Exit 41. I still remember that.
Exit 41, yeah. And so right across the street from the Walmart, you can't miss it. And so we moved into that. So we had to shop for spaces, right? And there was this little 900 square foot strip mall location right next to the H&R Block, and I think Papa Murphy's or something was next to us.
There was a GameStop down in the strip, and I always thought that was fun because I could go down there every time I was at the office.
Right. There was an Edward Jones, all the big franchise things that you know about, and a Mexican restaurant, movie theater not far away. Yeah, but bottom line was, it got a lot of foot traffic and a lot of visibility, easy for people to see. They wouldn't know from our sign because we picked Reform Medicine as the name of
Yeah,
the
how did that
clinic.
come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and then we did a little bit of marketing, had some radio ads, and I did a paid radio spot, which, I don't know, they might still be running those and reruns on the show I got on, because the guy would give me 20 minutes because he was so enthralled with the model.
He gave you 20 minutes?
We were paying for 2 minutes, and he would sit and have conversations with me, tell me about family members who were going broke because of their health care, and the craziness that was the insurance company. He would just talk, and I would talk. It'd be like this instead of a 2-minute interview, it would go stretch into 15, 20 minutes, week after week after week.
I mean, that's kind of an early validation of what you're doing.
Oh, no kidding, right? I was like, "Oh, stroke me some more, Mr. DJ." Um, it's just an old country music station, but you wouldn't believe the number of people like, "Yeah, I heard you on Moose Country." And, "Okay, I had no
Yeah,
idea."
wow.
Moose Country, what's that? "Oh, that's the radio station?" But it was ridiculous, like 75 bucks to do an interview, and Jay Moore, God bless him, would he was just enthralled with the concept, and so we would just chit chat away, and it was really a lot of fun. So, um, that was before podcasting was a thing, and so it was live radio, and then we had did a few radio spots and so forth. But mostly it was just hustling. It was going to chamber meetings and going to anybody who would listen. We would go tell the story. Um, so that was the non compete. So physicians who have non competes, if you're a new physician. The whole non compete thing that came up out of the federal government, as I understand it, really doesn't apply to physicians. Right. So we'd all kind of hoped, oh, great, we're going to get a break finally on non compete clauses, except that, oh, it doesn't apply to us. So in my opinion, is, something that you have to do a little soul searching on as a physician or provider or whatever you want to call it. If you want certain jobs, you're going to have to sign things with non competes or try to negotiate your way out of them. But big systems with really deep billions and billions of dollars worth of money in their pockets will just hire the next guy. They see you as a commodity, just like they see a patient as an economic unit of economic value. So every new patient that they bring into the system's worth about $1 million over their lifetime. They figure it's probably a bigger number now, and so they just need somebody in there to see patients, right? And if you won't take their fancy job, then somebody else will. And so, it's one of those hard realities. You just got to decide if you're going to tolerate that, if you're going to go to work for a big system, or ask that it not be there. And I don't know how they would respond to that, to be honest.
Did you have any moments where you like right at the beginning, not a little later, where you're wondering like, oh, is this going to work or not? Did you have anything right away that you got either blindsided by or felt like you derailed by something? Did you have any sort of moment like that, or was it relatively smooth? Any early crises, I guess
Um,
is what I'm asking.
yeah, uh, not that I recall. It just that it. I was pleasantly surprised that the day we opened, we had an average of 5 patients on the schedule already. Day one, there weren't. There was. I don't think there was ever a day when we had no patients to see. And it was a lot of experimenting, trying to figure out what worked and what worked well, and but it wasn't. They weren't patient care issues. They were just
Yeah, yeah,
running
business.
business issues. You know, and we didn't from the get go. We just set rules. This is a good thing to think about if you're a provider, physician thinking about doing this. Is what are you willing to do and what are you not willing to do, and are you willing to go to the mat for that? And we because of the medical weight loss practice, we knew we were going to have a lot of patients who'd come in on a routine basis, like every month or more often, depending on how well they were doing or not doing. So I wanted to be able to offer them a weekend option and an evening option. So I started out right away offering one evening a week, so those people who were didn't have to take time off work every single month to come to see me, because that becomes a real burden. So they could come in on a Saturday morning or a Wednesday evening between like 5 and 8. So we opened late and we stayed open late. And that was very popular, and we continued that now, and that's one of the biggest drivers. Well, it's a big question that comes up. Well, what do you have for early morning hours, after work hours, and so forth? So now we're currently open at 6 in the morning in some locations, some days of the week, and 7 o'clock a.m. I think everywhere, and then we also have at least one evening a week in every
So
location.
you had flexible hours and you had ways of kind of getting people in the door. You had early marketing efforts. Did you? I remember as being younger talking about how you would ask people how they heard about you, and I was going to ask whether you thought that all those marketing efforts paid off. But what I remember is that it seemed like overwhelmingly number one marketing tactic was word of mouth, and that was like what everybody said.
95, 98% word of mouth. And then Moose Country Radio. Yeah, yeah, overwhelmingly word of mouth, and which meant, you know, people not only, I mean, the cost of what we were doing. I mean, those days we were charging like $55 for an office visit, and low cost labs $30 or something to get real common labs done. And so price was part of it, but there was also the part of it of, gee, we can get in when we need to, and gee, it's just different care experience. They got longer appointment times. You don't feel rushed. It just feels like a whole better way, to have a doctor relationship. And so all that together, people just go out and rave about it, And this is, I mean, I think there were Google reviews in those days, but it was, I didn't pay much attention to that, frankly, because I didn't put a whole lot of stock in it. The thing that, of course, for a physician, or I suppose an accountant or a lawyer, or anybody in the service industry, or really anybody selling anything, the thing that was the real marker for me was when we started getting repeat patients, who not only thought, yeah, the first time was cool, but they thought it was so cool they're going to come back and do this again. And so, getting back to the whole idea of what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do, what I wasn't willing to do was say, you can call me anytime, day or night. I'll be on call 100% of the time, because that was, even when I was working for the big system, that always felt like you were just kind of wasting energy getting somebody to be on call, when most of the time what you would do is something you could have done during the workday, but the patient just didn't think to call during the workday, or they forgot to call, or somebody had an emergency and they needed an ER. you know. Otherwise, particularly in the fee-for-service world, you were giving away free care, um, uh, and then people wouldn't come in during the day, and they'd call you at night, and you'd help them on the phone at night and not be able to charge anything. And again, this was back before credit cards over the phone was an easy thing to do, and Toast and pick your branded point of service payment system, Apple Pay, Stripe, all those things didn't exist. But it wasn't. I wasn't looking to start a practice where I was the concierge medicine. They do this, of course, but they charge huge membership fees, and they limit the number of patients that they take, and they know them all really well because there's so few of them. But they're it's a different model. Just a different model. So, and that isn't what people, I didn't think, in Western Wisconsin anyway, needed or wanted, was big membership fees and to have me bill their insurance, and I wasn't interested in billing insurance anyway. So, but that I would just encourage people to call early. If you get something, you think you're going to need something from us, call us right away. Don't wait around. We can usually get you in and get you taken care of. So that's, we still say that today, actually. And we don't. I carried a call cell phone for 3 years. A couple of employers with, probably together about 3,000 patients. And in 3 years, I got, I think, 3 phone calls.
Yeah, it's not really a area of medicine that seems like it really makes sense to have somebody on call, because what really just exactly what you said. Where it's, if you need to call your primary care physician or your family medical doctor, doctor in family medicine, you can either wait until 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., whatever time you open, or if you really need somebody, you probably need an emergency room doctor if it really needs to be. I mean, it just seems like it's maybe a minor convenience for the patient and then just a huge headache for the doctor.
Right. That's basically what it came down to. And it wasn't, and everybody who's done that, I mean, I remember taking phone calls from nursing home patients, and the nursing home calls you and says, yeah, it's our protocol. I have to call you if Mrs. Jones falls or something. And Mrs. Jones falls every night. So every one of us is getting a call 2 a.m. because Mrs. Jones slipped out of bed or something. And these protocols, call for a Tylenol order. Mr. Smith has a fever, or, I mean, just stuff like that. You kind of like, this is just crazy. What, we systematically should just be easier than just calling the doctor in the middle of the night. So
all of that, you were just like, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna.
And most of that was attached, honestly, to a Medicare population, which is older people, and these were not going to be our target patients because they kind of have a system that works for them. It ain't perfect, but Medicare pays the bills for things.
Yeah, they're not particularly price sensitive.
And Medicare people are on fixed incomes. They're not going to be people who are looking to pay cash for anything if they can avoid it, right? So that just wasn't going to be our patient population. So
Yeah, so yeah, that gets the whole no insurance thing, but just to paint the picture a little more of that time, so you had the strip mall, space, you had 1 employee, just like Brian, you had an MA who worked the front desk and was the, room to patient, um, and 1 exam room, 1 break room.
1.5 exam rooms. I could convert my
Yeah.
office into an exam room if I needed to. It also served as a supply room. I think it had a slop sink in it. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, that's right, and that was it.
But a little tiny desk and my laptop
Yeah,
computer.
and that was it, and that's how it started. Did you ever hit a point where maybe, fast forward a few months or a year or whatever timeline it may be, did you ever hit a point where you were thinking, "Oh, man, this might not actually work?" Or, "Ooh."
Buyer's
Yeah, did you
remorse.
ever have that? Did you have a phase of that? Did it come and go? What was that like? Never.
Never, never did I believe this wouldn't work. Um, it took 9 months before we actually saw enough revenue stream that I could actually pay myself something.
I mean, but just
So,
generally, it's
so
a
for eight
small
months, we
business, it takes much longer than that. So that's
right.
actually pretty good.
And so as a physician, I knew that we'd be okay. This would be okay. And really, we set the prices so low as to be kind of a think of it as an introductory model or a test marketing kind of thing. Are people willing to pay cash and go somewhere outside of the systems they're aware of and see some independent guy doing this, God knows what type of business model and try it out? And then if they do try it out, will they come back? And so we steadily crept up our numbers. And at the end of year one, I guess it would be the last 3 months at the end of year two, we were solidly booked. 30-minute appointments, 8 hours a day, 16 patients a day, one after the other. We're getting to the point of, gee, yeah, now it's taking days to get in to see Dr. Usher, which was not, I wasn't trying to build something where people would have no access to me, but it's always, it's just inevitable if you get somebody who's rocking along and doing really well, and word of mouth and new patients and no membership fees, you have to kind of just keep seeing people because that's how fee for service works. So, but it was along that time that I had somewhere in year two, I had met up with another physician who worked with me, kind of on an as needed basis. She would cover Fridays or one day a week or something like that, so I could get away when I
Mhm.
wanted to. Um,
But you never had a moment
but
where you thought, "What about" you had a sounds like you were very confident on, like, the medical side of things or just, being the doctor, the physician, but the business side of it, were there any crises, maybe not early on, but just moments where you felt like, "Oh my god, like, this is" doing I don't know, you were doing payroll or you were doing something where you're just like, "This is I hate this," or did you ever have any moment?
no, I didn't. I there were
'Cause people talk, they'll say,
as we grew.
being at a business is so hard, and I would sleepless
Yep.
nights and blah, blah, blah.
Right. Now, from a business perspective, I think we did enough prep work. I think probably one of the most important things early on was that I had your mom's complete buy-in. I mean, she was right there with me, lock, stock, and barrel. We were goose stepping together, if you will. We both knew this is what we're in for, but we both felt like this is the future. This has got to work. Uh, where it became a whole different model was when the direct primary care idea popped up, the membership contracting with employers and so forth. That was the real accelerator, kind of the where I thought, oh, this has the potential to really grow bigger than I ever imagined. And again, we just had to do one and to get the feel for that and how that looked. And since then, we've been doing that for now. We have 32 different employers we work with, and we've kind of figured out what the value of those relationships are and how it is that works, and been able to speak to that well. And we have a fair number of sales conversations now about that. In fact, next week I'm going to a self-fund summit for self-funded employers, self-insured employers. We're going to talk about this with a couple of other physicians about how what we do works into self-funded health plans to be able to save those plans literally millions of dollars, depending on how big they are, every year. And sometimes year one just really makes a huge difference. 20 to 40% cuts in their health spend.
So I guess we're kind of skipping the middle, but fast forward many years after that, you hit that point where you had full schedule, full patient. You knew, all right, the model's going to work. I can make enough money, or I can make the same amount of money that I was making before. Got into the
right.
employer thing. Is there anything you would have done differently knowing what you know now? Which is kind of a lame question, but it seems like a good one to ask. Because it's not to say things went relatively smoothly as small businesses go, it seems like, but nobody does anything
Hmm.
perfectly. We're far from perfectly.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate and blessed not to run into, major catastrophic things like I didn't get hit by a bus or,
Yeah.
have the big myocardial
The roof
infarction
caved
and
in of the first clinic or something.
get laid up. Right, right. I mean, we were careful to not go too cheap on things, and uh, things I learned. If you rent a space and build it out, that costs a lot of money, and then when you leave that space, if you don't read your contract carefully, then you have to pay somebody to tear that down. All that. That was one little bite that I didn't see coming. Like, what? I got to what? You can't just rent that to the next guy. Maybe the next guy wants that. No, you got to take that out of there because this is a retail, and they wanted it back to the shape it was in before I mucked it up. So, you learn things about contracting and, what real estate. It's been a fascinating ride, but there's as my working genius results would say, I'm a galvanizer inventor, right? So creating solutions and talking about them to people that's my wheelhouse. That's what I love to do. And so um, everything that we did, we learned about, we figured out like, oh, yep, there's a little spend we didn't see coming, but none of it was catastrophic. It's just stuff you kind of learn. Yeah. Um, uh, yeah, reading contracts carefully. And it was nice to have a lawyer in the house, in the family, who could kind of look things over and make sure I wasn't stepping on landmines when we signed leases and sales agreements, things like that. Um, so no, I would say, and maybe some people would argue that, oh, you just had all these assets and it was really easy for you. And I would say, well, maybe, but it was, you can hire lawyers, you can hire accountants, you pay your financial people to give you advice and all that stuff. It's those assets are out there. You just have to, yeah, the word of mouth works well for them also. You don't want to just go in and to the H&R Block people and go, yeah, I got this situation and I'm going to tell me what you think about the tax implications. You have to have good people that you trust, and word of mouth works really well for that. People who referring you to people they know is still probably the best way to get somebody really good to work with, because you trust these people's opinions and they're giving you good advice
Yeah, that's
typically.
something I learned. I really learned to appreciate working for a smaller company. I guess a big company too, but a big company's kind of hokey, and they kind of just say to the thing, "Your network is your net worth," and it's like, it's just kind of like what some things people say. But then once you kind of get into the weeds, or you kind of get in the trenches of a smaller company where you really have to make things happen, and you really have to move the ball forward and find somebody, and then it becomes very clear once you're put in kind of those decision making roles that you've got to find people, and the easiest or the most reliable way to find someone good and find something that you want, or a relationship that you think is really going to go somewhere, is to find somebody you trust and find out who they worked with or what they recommend. And
Right, ask
yeah,
somebody you
literally
know.
somebody and that's where it's gotten, yeah, totally overcooked, that term networking and who you know. But
Right. Everybody wants to go to social media and the internet, and what you really need to do is go to this guy you've known for 5 years and work closely with, or some whatever your relationship is. But yeah, you trust their opinion. Why wouldn't you at least see what they have to say about these consultants and so forth? Yeah, construction guys. You just plumbers, mechanics, the whole thing.
yeah, professional services are right on down to skilled labor to.
Yeah, you can have a really slick website, and bad word of mouth will just overwhelm that. No amount of fanciness on your LinkedIn page will overcome the fact that people think you're a jerk.
Yeah. First things first. Yeah. But if you do have the goods, you have a good product or a good delivery method for your service, slick website, a LinkedIn product or LinkedIn page, and a podcast can throw some gasoline on
Right.
the fire.
That all helps a lot. Yeah. 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 But it's exactly right. If you don't have, you got to have some there before you can go talk about what you got, for sure.
Well, this has been a great episode, so I think we'll wrap it there. Thanks for listening to The Treatment Plan. If you enjoyed the conversation, subscribe on YouTube, follow on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. And if someone comes to mind who'd like this show, tell them about it or send it their way using the share button.